Dear partners and friends, it's a sign of hope to be able to meet again and to strive together to continue the journey towards justice in any means possible. Although it's difficult to meet face to face, but we thank God for the possibility of meeting via the web. It's a shaping time, not merely for the Middle East, but for the Church around the communion, for understanding of our identity and what does it mean to be the Church for today. How does the Church understand its mission in the light of the new reality that the world is facing due to the pandemic and all related consequences? A close look at the situation in Lebanon and Syria can never be perceived away from the rapid changes in the Middle East. We realize that the pandemic added to the several struggles that our churches are facing. The war situation in the area, whether in Syria or Palestine, the economic crisis in Syria and Lebanon, pushing more people under the line of poverty, the devaluation of the currency both in Syria and Lebanon, not to forget lately the explosion in Beirut. A few days ago, we started to hear of boats of death where Lebanese are fleeing Lebanon, and unfortunately, they are dying in the ocean, repeating the story of the Syrian refugees. I have lived during the several Lebanese wars, but never seen people as discouraged as today. I believe that the people in Lebanon and Syria have reached the verge of losing hope when they face one problem after the other, and no progress is seen on the issue of peace, stability, and preserving the dignity of the people. The situation in Lebanon and Syria is closely linked to the changes that are happening in the Middle East region, imposed by political reality in the whole area and struggle among world powers. One can easily recognize the transformation of the Middle East with the rise of the regional powers of Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Iran, and each with their own agendas. Likewise, now there are two alliances fostering regional frontline conflict: Russia, Iran, Syria, and Hezbollah in Lebanon versus the US, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. Turkey is still in the middle, not yet committed to either side. Today, I would like to point to some of the changes that are happening in the region and unfortunately impact our daily life. First, Palestine-Israel conflict is no longer seen at the center for peace. 15 or 20 years ago, people who monitored Middle East affairs generally believed that solving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict will be the key to peace and greater stability. Today, experts no longer view the Palestine-Israel conflict as a linchpin of stability. Traditional constructs are shifting. The new solutions are proposed, for example, a potential Gulf Sunni alignment with Israel is starting to counterbalance Iran. We have to face the fact that the danger in the region is getting greater. Today, the choice is even more between war and peace, with what feels like a move back to something like the Cold War. Second, we can easily see that there is loss of dialogue and imposed decisions. It concerns me that the language of dialogue is no more a way to peace, but rather imposing policies and strategies like the annexation in Israel or retaining the Hagia Sophia Church to become a mosque again in Turkey. There is an increased attitude of forced decisions. This trend is a new strategy where agreements are signed, leaving the previous questions of justice not answered. Third, today we see that many peace initiatives and signing agreements with Israel are happening without focusing on justice towards the Palestinians. I wonder if this strategy will help to reach just peace in the area. In 2020, the Trump administration has announced a Middle East peace plan, and what we see happening are forced decisions, denying the Palestinians fundamental political, economic, and human rights. The proposal entitled Peace to Prosperity, a vision to improve the lives of Palestinians and Israeli people. It would allow Israel to annex all its West Bank settlements, as well as the Jordan Valley. This reverses both United Nations solutions and ruling by the International Court of Justice that states these settlements are illegal. I wonder if we are really journeying towards peace. Fourth, an important element that affects the region is the tension between Iran and the US. It has pushed lots of instability in the region, mainly dealing with Hezbollah as an ally to Iran, and thus fighting Iran in Lebanon and Syria. Due to this situation, the area is in tension, and people are worried of civil war developing in the region, whether in Lebanon, Iraq, and Iran. Tensions in the area reflect on our daily life in Lebanon and Syria. Many Christians consider leaving the country and finding a better opportunity around the world. It should remain our concern how to support the Christian presence in the Middle East through supporting them inside their country. In the last explosion in Beirut, with the damage of 4 hospitals who will not resume their work in the coming few months, there was a strong voice in the country of providing financial support for the nurses and doctors who lost their jobs and started to apply for jobs to live overseas. We are at a risk in Lebanon and in Syria of having a brain drain where we lose our educated and human resources. The medical sector will be affected, and also other sectors. In the midst of all this, we ask the question, where is the US in regards to the Middle East region? In an article that I have read lately, claims that the US is in the back seat. Compared with previous presidents, the Trump administration has taken a very different approach to foreign policy in the Middle East and beyond. War weariness within the US aligns with that approach of disengagement. 10 or 15 years ago, the US would have had a different role. And the loss of the role is not the political role, but as the article explains, one of the tragic things we've lost is a lot of values-driven human rights programs, democracy programs, support for society initiatives, and engaging in public diplomacy. The role of the US has changed, and for sure, we're not interested in political involvement as much in value involvement in this area. Sharing the values of the US has always been an important element in our encounter. In the midst of all these changes, one asks the question, what can the church do? What are we called to do? I have some ideas that we hope to discuss them further after seeing the video. I believe that we have to learn to see and understand the whole changes happening in the area and try to perceive what role we can play as a church on different levels. Although we many times feel helpless in front of world politics in the Middle East, still we are called to see the whole picture and be involved accordingly. We cannot only focus on the situation of Lebanon or Syria without seeing what's happening in the region. Second, we are called to speak as a church and to be a voice for justice, even when we might feel that we are just a voice in the wilderness. Our silence as a church leads to more injustice. Third, we are called to be more involved as a church with the civil society and to cooperate when possible. The civil society played a great role in the last Lebanese explosion. I'm afraid to say that the civil society was closer to the pain of the people. Fourth, we are called to think together about creative ways of advocacy. Our meeting today is one way of thinking together about new ways. Advocacy happened earlier, but probably today we need to think of new ways for advocacy that can create impact and can help change to happen. We need to encourage dialogue again, and I believe it's only dialogue that will help us reach just peace and will help us grow to do the will of God, aside from forcing our agendas on others. Sixth, we are called to be a bridge of reconciliation and stop allowing abusing religion for political agendas. I'm afraid that the future in the Middle East will carry more tension among the Sunni and Shiite groups who are both Muslims. How can the church be a bridge of reconciliation among Muslims in the future? Seventh, we are called to be a voice that cares to deal with the cause of injustice, not merely the outcome. We must look at the root causes of conflicts here and speak against any propensity to look for military solutions. Eighth, one of the greatest roles that the church can have is focusing on the youth, on how we keep the hope for the younger generations, how we can journey with the young so they believe that they will have a better future in the Middle East. I believe the youth are at the center of our hope, whether in the church, in Lebanon, in Syria, and in Palestine. And we should always, when we think of the future, to hear their voice in that. Ninth, how to learn to turn the crisis to opportunity is a key element today. I will not repeat what others will be sharing, but having an NGO as a synod, the CPS, Compassion Protestant Society, you will be hearing more about it from George. This decision was a timely decision. It helped us as a church to go outside the regular worship and go beyond the church walls. 10th, how to remain a voice for the voiceless. People in the Middle East will always remain at the center of our hope. How do we do change? We all recognize that there should be a change happening in our countries, but how to do it is very important. I believe the voice of the people is an important force. Now we know that many people say we don't want the US to interfere. and we don't want Iran to interfere. The Iraqis say Iraq is for the Iraqis. In Lebanon, people want all the corrupt leaders to go and to start over with a clean state. I believe the voice of the people to keep mentioning the pain and speaking against injustice is the main force for a better Middle East. While we affirm the necessity of responding to the crisis through our witness in pastoral and humanitarian witness, we at such a moment feel that it's important to raise up the prophetic voice and reaffirm our commitment for transforming the world. We are called for new ways of being church in the public place. And still, one of the biggest challenges that we have is how we can keep our values in the midst of all that's happening. The economic situation in Lebanon and Syria and the increase of hunger pushes people to be tempted to accept any solution just to have a normal life. In Macron's last visit to Lebanon, many Lebanese were asking France to be in control again, longing for the colonial times. This is unfortunately a spirit of fatigue, whether among the people in the Middle East or the international community. We should not compromise our values, even when we are hungry. And I'm afraid the strategy is to make people hungry so they can kneel and they can accept with any solution. During our time of pain, I'm happy to say that the involvement of the world community has given us strength. In the last incident of Beirut explosion, I was touched with the number of worship services carried around the world and the communion, whether it's in the USA, Latin America, Cuba, Africa, and many other places that were struggling. Many shared their resources, and your church is one of the groups that really gave support to help the people have dignified life. We could not have faced this situation, whether in Syria or Lebanon, away from our partners. We know, and we have learned to differentiate between policies, pragmatic agendas, politics, and people. As WCRC, we have been a platform to share the story, to speak up, and I know this network, Syria-Lebanon network, is the right place to share the story of pain and hope. We appreciate that even when you are overwhelmed with your corona, with your elections, with your racial issues, you are keen to hear our pain. This is a time of hope. In the midst of our pain and struggle, we see hope, mainly because God is with us and we are together, strengthening one another. This is a time of building a stronger communion, a stronger partnership. Today we struggle together to be an impactful church. I confess today that we are still discerning how to be the church in the Middle East, in facing the reality of today. And our meeting today is a time of thinking together, strengthening each other, trusting that God will journey with us as a network. We could recognize the pain, but ask the Holy Spirit to guide our minds and hearts and keep us longing for justice. I know we all have our daily injustices around us, and we are overwhelmed and occupied with injustices around, whether in the US or the Middle East. And we are challenged every day with the question, where is your God? We might not have a specific answer, a relevant one for today, but we are assured that we are on the right path, a path of cross and resurrection, a path of weakness and strength, a path where we are persecuted but not crushed, a path where the church is alive because we know that God is with us. In that last explosion in Beirut, a nurse shared her story about how she rescued 3 babies who were triplets in the intensive nursery room in the hospital. She said, "When the wall fell, I held the 3 babies closely to my chest and made sure that they are looking at my face. I did not want them to see the damage, so it will not stay in their memory. And I wanted them to look in my eyes to get strength from my face." I believe this is our story today as a network. This is a place to look closely at each other's face and get strength and trust that there will be a better tomorrow. Today, we do not only see each other's faces, but the face of God as well. To God be all glory. Amen.